Welcome back to Hardwood Hustle. Sam and TJ with you today, and we've got a special episode because we've got a special guest. Lisa's better half, Brendan O'Mara. Brendan's a successful coach in his own right, national championship winning coach in rugby. Brendan, excited to have you on the show.
Gentlemen, great to be here. I think that's the first time I've ever been called the better half of our duo, which we call the O'Mara coaching ticket. But great to be here. I'm a longtime forced listener of the podcast, which every time I take some nuggets, but I call myself the vice president of quality control because I got to do the last listen before we post it. But it's I've joked about being on for a couple of years and never thought it was going to happen. So listen to you guys every week. Obviously, we catch up sometimes when you're on Zoom with Lisa, but great to be here.
Yeah, that was a stretch, the better half, Sam. I'm not sure where that came from. I definitely would have not gone that direction, but to each their own. Hey, Brendan, we always have some great conversations when we're hanging out at different places talking about, coaching is coaching, no matter where you do it, no matter, who you're coaching, what age, and you've done it at the professional level, you've done it at the college level, you've done it at a whole bunch of different levels, just like Sam and I. And there are some things that are different, age and stage. There's some things that are different sport by sport, but there's also some things that are just straight universal, and some of those things where it's like either you can lead people or you can't lead people. And we have some really good conversations around buy-in. So I want to just start there. What are some of the best ways you found to create buy-in with your athletes?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of the buzzword in coaching these days of connection. Like, how do you get connection with your players, amongst your players, coach to player connection? And I think the biggest thing is it takes intention and time. Like, how it's different for every level, right? Like, you talk about getting buy-in. You want buy-in because then you can have some player-led areas of culture, your X's and O's. If they're player-led, you get a lot more out of it. So it starts with putting the time in. Like, for example, I'm starting with a new team in professional rugby. Like, we won't be boots on grass till first week of March, but I've already had a Zoom with every single player. The head coach is extremely organized. I'm the main assistant coach, and he asked me to have the first week I signed with the team. He's like, here's the squad. Here's all the contact information. I want you to have a 15-minute Zoom with every single player over the next 10 days. And then every week I have a list of like 5 or 6 players that I'm going to connect with so that I'm getting touch points as we go along. And I'll also be sending out kind of my area. I coach, we call it in rugby the attack, which is basically the offense. I'm kind of like the offensive coordinator. Rugby terms, we call it the attack coach. I'll be sending out stuff, meeting with the key decision makers. But I think you have to put in the time to make sure you have that connection from a personal level and then from an X's and O's level, and leave space for players to express their buy-in. Like, do they have questions? And the better you know players, the more you're going to be able to feel like, is this guy on board with me? And it's just similar to in basketball. You guys would have some key influential players when it comes to buy-in. Like your starting point guard, if he's not buying what you're selling when it comes to your offense, like your offense isn't going to be as good. There's just no way. Because you want to eventually get to the point where he's leading it. When you put in anything new for a new opponent or you're reviewing a game, he's the one that's like, hey, timeout. Like, that was great. This is what we need to do better. And it's the same in rugby. We have similar positions. We have like a quarterback type position. And for us, we want to get to the stage where like he's kind of by the end of the week before a game, he's leading it. And for that to happen properly, there has to be buy-in. And I think come back to that word connection again, like, you have to create organic opportunities to just connect with people. If you connect on a personal level, you're going to connect better on an X's and O level. So examples of just like, for us, I'm dealing with adults. So like getting a coffee early in the week with some of those guys, making sure I have to check myself and like sometimes talk about life and not X's and O's, because I can get very like, hey, this is how we're going to play. What do you think? And make sure I'm stepping back like, oh, hey, how's your wife? How's your kid? So you're keeping those personal connections because it does lead to better buy-in and execution on the X's and O's anyway. And be genuinely curious about those people's lives.
Yeah, I think players might be able to sift through if it's like you're checking the box on asking their personal questions, but are you really listening? Are you asking follow up? But yeah, so Brendan, going back big picture for a second, buy-in I think is one of those core values that probably is important to any winning culture. I heard I heard Dwayne Wade talking about their 2006 Miami Heat NBA championship and how Pat Riley challenged that team to become a more together team, to buy into being together. And he said that was probably the most together team he had played on. And so when it comes to buy-in, I guess tell me, this is one framework. I don't know if I think it's true, but I don't know if I fully believe it. You get buy-in through what you said, which is personal relationship, or so I think there's two ways: relationship or competency. Ideally, both, meaning the player believes the coach is really competent at what they do. That player believes that coach knows what they're talking about, can make them better, can make the team better. Is there any other missing piece to getting buy-in, or do you think those are the two biggest ones?
No, yeah, I think that kind of comes down to the trust piece. And 100%, I've always looked at it as like a scale. Like some players are purely like performance driven. Like I had like my quarterback type position player I've worked with, who I worked closest with the last 2 years, is an English guy. He's a very seasoned pro, and he's what I say is the far performance side of the scale. Like he actually doesn't care about the personal relationship. He cares about like, are you setting me up to perform? Do you know your stuff as a coach? And are you helping me show up on Saturday, be the best player I can be, or are you making me better? And then there's other players that are like, they're on the scale of like, do you care about me as a person? Like I'll actually feel like you're a great coach just if you put your arm around me and I feel like there's a connection and you care about who I am as a person and like my journey in life. And I think a lot of players are kind of in the middle, like they want to be cared about and they also want to be set up to perform and see that competency. But I think it's a huge piece, and a lot of that, like you can show your competence. Competency a lot of times is behind closed doors, right? It's what you're doing when you're not around the players. You're watching film. You're really organized with your thoughts and your messages. And it's also, if you do that properly and you feel confident in your X's and O's and your competency, it allows you just to be more open to getting challenged by players. Like for us, again, we're dealing with grown men. Like challenging our stuff as coaches is just common ground. And you have to, if you're really confident in it, you can take a challenge in front of a group like, hey, are you sure why we're doing that, coach? And you sometimes you have to have the ability to be like, you know what, that's a good point. Maybe like let's explore what you're saying. But if you're not confident in your stuff and you get defensive, then you lose that the confidence in your competency. But 100% agree. Those are the two pieces I've always thought about.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's been a long time since we've had like a losing season, and I'm not hoping to have a losing season right now. But we started 2-8, and one of the things I started to do is reflect on like, and a couple of people are like, man, I hope the team stays together. I hope that whatever. And I haven't been in that territory. I'm like, well, okay, what exactly does keep them together? And I look back, and I've told this story before, but we were like 5-26 going into my very first season in coaching, going into our last game, and I was leaving coaching. I was going to go get a job. I'm like, I'm no good at this. And my dad, who was a longtime coach, called and said, well, just go to practice, see how it goes, call me afterwards. And we went to practice, and he's like, how'd it go? I was like, it's great. I was like, the girls were fully engaged. I was coaching women's basketball. They were fully engaged, like great teammates. And he said, well, then maybe it is for you, because if your team stays together and they're still about it when you're losing, that's much harder to do. And so winning oftentimes can mask that stuff, where you don't know like where people are, like whether they really truly buy in or not. But they're not going to complain when you're winning. But you do get tested when things aren't going well. We got a really new team this year, a lot of new players. So I'm like, well, they don't know the history. They don't know that we've won a ton of games, and they don't know. So what are they basing my competency on? So even as a 25-year head coach, like I'm questioning myself, like what are these things? Our guys have been great. We're on a 3-game win streak. They're together. And but the whole time along, I think this is important for coaches to know, you're examining like, what are those things? And, I do believe that like the two things you're alluding to, there's some belief in competency, like, kind of know what you're talking about. You're delivering a good message, never stopped caring about them. Weren't just judging them, your relationship based on whether you were winning or losing, which is a hard thing to do. And so let's just say that you get to that place and you don't have buy-in. There's a lot of coaches in here, like they're maybe younger players, like high school players. They don't necessarily know what to do. We're losing, so people are watching me, and my parents are saying this, and they're going through. How does somebody battle through that struggle? I think we're talking about it. Number one, be competent in what you're doing. Like, work hard at your job, work hard at being a good coach, work hard at delivering good messages, stay connected with the players. Now, let's say you've got some rumblings going on there, and we've all been in this situation, right? Like, what do you do to kind of right the ship? What do you do to kind of get everybody back on board when things aren't going well?
Yeah, no, great question. I mean, I had a experience like that in the last 2 seasons. So two seasons ago, I was with a new team, professional rugby team based out of Utah, and we started the season 2-4. Like, I was new, the assistant coach doing the defense was new, the head coach and another assistant, it was their second year. And 100%, you start feeling like a bit of that buy-in fading as we were trying to build buy-in because we were new. And one thing I remember, we had a meeting because it wasn't across the board. And it was kind of like, anytime you have a team that's not winning, like, the cracks start appearing. And like you said, it's such a teller of your culture when you're going through a rough patch. And I remember we had a meeting, and I said to the other coaches halfway through the season, because we were still struggling, and we ended up going 5-11, missing the playoffs. But I was like, we felt pretty confident. Like, the management above us was like, hey, like, we think you guys are doing a good job. We know the pieces aren't there this year. Like, gave us a lot of confidence we would get another crack at it. And I remember saying, like, hey, like, while we're losing, we're going to be finding out pretty clearly who we want to win with next year. And it's a little different. I mean, I know a lot of high school coaches, college coaches listen to this. We were at a professional level, right? So we kind of looked at it like, who's on the bus with us this year when it's tough, and who clearly, when there was cracks, was trying to like slash the tires and let this bus break down. And we made some really tough, clear decisions. Like, these are the guys we want to win with next year, and we believe we can right the ship. And so we had a huge overhaul, like almost 50% of our roster. We made some changes and got what we believed was the right people on the bus, recruited kind of more senior professional leadership. And last season, we finished top of the table, the number 1 seed going to the playoffs, ended up losing the semifinal. But I think sometimes in our situation, obviously, we just ended up changing personnel when we got to the end of the season. But I think it is one of those things, like, you take stock of who are the people that want to ride with you and want to believe and want to push forward, and who are the people that, when there's cracks and they're challenged to push forward with the group, they actually don't want to go with you. And you also, in the moment, you can't avoid those people. You got to, like, step into it. Try to get those people on board. Try to show them, like, we can be better and get them to go with the group. But
Yeah, I think a good point there. Like, I think avoiding it is the worst thing you can do. And I'm thinking about a high school coach. I was actually at a high school tournament this weekend, and all different coaches were in different places, winning, losing, whatever. I was hearing about parent emails coming in, different things that are going on. It's like, what can you do? And I was thinking to myself, like, what do you do in that situation? And I think the worst thing that you can do, so you got a sophomore, and they're, as a pro, like, you cut them and you get somebody new, right? But in high school, like, what do? Can you avoid it for 3 years and just all of a sudden there's this annoying, like, background noise, and, like, you're going through and people aren't. So what you just said there, I think, is super important, is that you can't sweep it under the rug. Like, it has to be that there has to be some level of, I don't know, say confrontation is the right word, but, like, calling it out to the light, like, hey, here's what it is. And sometimes this may mean a player quits, but I think that the team, when they know what's going on and you don't address it, it becomes a really big problem. Would you agree?
yeah, and to your point, like, in that season, like, you have to, like, you may not understand why there is a bit of a block in the buy-in. Like, in that season, it can't be. You have to be really careful. Like, you have to leave space to get out what the core of something is, or the issue is, or why someone's not buying in. So exactly that. Don't avoid it. Like, have a conversation. Try to have it in a safe space. And literally that season, I had a few of those conversations. Like, hey man, it doesn't seem like you're buying into, or you're feeling what we're trying to do on offense. Like, what are you thinking? What are your thoughts? Like, where are you at with this stuff? and just give them an opening. At the end of the day, someone has to, if you're going to go, 60, 40, 70, 30 to open the conversation, give them an opportunity, they also have to take it. And if they don't, it is what it is. But 100%, like if you avoid it, if you leave gray area, you're just leaving an opportunity for things to continue in a negative trajectory when you can try and just open up the conversation and get it back. I don't know, Sam, I'm sure you have experience with it.
Yeah, I mean, this is very interesting to me. TJ and I have talked about it on here some and off air. Yeah, when it happens a lot. So when a player, especially a better player, maybe the best player on the team, is influential of the other players, but they're not fully bought in, the coach is put into a really interesting spot. And I think a lot of coaches lean away from maybe the confrontation because they're fearful that if they confront, that player will leave, will transfer, will quit, will go further, to the other side of it. And so then they coach out of fear of losing the better player, especially in today's world, more so in the last 10 years of a more transfer heavy society we're in. So you said something just a second ago. Let me come back to this, Brendan. You said, you have it and it is what it is. Well, what does that mean? If you have the confrontational or the courageous conversation and you don't feel good about it walking away as a coach, you're like, gosh, I still don't know. I don't believe that they are in. Like, it is what it is, for me, would not be good enough, meaning I can't move forward with our team if this player's not on board. So I can't leave it as is what it is. We have to either get to bought in or we have to be removed. That player has to be removed from the situation. Talk to me about
Yeah,
that.
no, yeah, for sure. For sure. I think in that situation, like you probably want to steer everything back to, like, if it's still even in the first conversation, but if you can't get there, like, what are we all here doing, right? Like, we're here playing basketball, we're here playing rugby, we're part of a team, we're all trying to have a team individually and collectively be successful. So like try and break down, like is where we're at right now, like I'm feeling like you're not really bought into what we're trying to do here. At the end of the day, like this, like I'm happy to have a conversation about it, but what's best for you and for this team is we find a way to move forward on the same page. And I don't feel like we're there right now. And that's only going to hurt you as an individual player and your development this season and your ability to contribute to the team. And it's going to hurt us collectively. So as the coach, as the leader of this team, I'm here to bridge the gap. Like, what do we need to do to get to that, to get to the purpose of us being here? We're here to help this team be great, help this team be successful together. Let's do that. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, and I think you have to get to real like tangible things that like you can't talk too vague in general about it. TJ, you brought up this a few times, like you had a player a few years back who just Ben McCollum, who made a rise in D2, won multiple national championships, and now is at University of Iowa. He said, I try to identify players who are moody, and I don't recruit those players. If you're a moody guy, we just don't recruit you. You can't be in our program. It's not going to be fun for you, not going to be fun for me. I'm paraphrasing here, not using maybe his exact words. TJ, you had a player who you just weren't enjoying coaching. He didn't laugh at any of your jokes, didn't smile. It's like, and you just said, hey, I don't really enjoy coaching you. And you just kind of got to a place where we had a fork in the road. And then, but, like, what's a tangible thing? You got this player, something's not vibing, it's just not happening, and it's sometimes even you can't even fully put your words around it. You just know it's not right. And you just have a conversation and you just kind of put it on the table, and that player gets to put their stuff on the table, and you try to come to some common ground. But we got to identify what is the common ground. I think that's coaches listening. What can we give them as tangible things?
Yeah, I think that's real. I think this is a super important conversation because I just felt it this weekend talking to these coaches. Like, people get into this situation, like, what do I do? Like, how do I handle this? And one, I think this is super, and maybe at a professional level, Brendan, you guys have more clarity on this. And I think in college, maybe a little more clarity, but in high school, maybe not always as much, but I think it's super important. And you hear like Nick Saban talk about the standard, like you got to hold this standard, right? But let's be honest for a second. If you don't hold the standard and you're an inside linebacker for Alabama, the guy behind you is a 5-star too. You know what I mean? And so like there's this thing. And when a high school coach is not sitting in that same situation, well, I got this guy that can get 20 or this girl that can get 20, and I don't have anybody behind them that can get 20, right? And so I think just by default, they find it harder to hold the standard, right? In pro, you might deal with it like, well, shoot, they're on a big contract, you know what I mean? And like, I got to have them perform. I mean, you see this happen, like even at the college level, like this quarterback's not doing very well, but that's the one they paid $1 million in NIL. Like, what are you going to do? Are you going to put the guy in behind him? Like, I do think it's transferable at every level. Like the situation's just different. Like the contract's bigger, the NIL's bigger, or the high school, the guy or girl can get 20, other can get 20. We're all kind of in the same situation. But I think that, Sam, to your point, like really good, is that it's really easy to address this problem when there's clarity that there's not being met standards. You know, here's the standard you're not meeting. That's why I think you having standards is so important, so that you know when they're not hitting them, we actually have something concrete to talk about. And basically, when I went to that player and said, I'm not enjoying coaching you, it was because it was very gray. Like, was the standard being met or not being met? You know, like, I don't know. Like, is there a standard? That's why like gratitude is one of our biggest pillars. Like there was no gratitude from this player. That is the standard. Like we're going to be a grateful team. But younger in my coaching career, like I didn't have a standard necessarily to go back to say, well, this person's just got a bad attitude. I mean, they're not really, I mean, if they're coming out and dog cussing you, that's easy. They're not meeting the standard, get rid of them. Right. But if they're showing up every day and it's like a ho-hum attitude, but they're not really being negative, but you also know they're not feeding the team. You know, I think this is where coaches struggle the most. They're like, I don't have anything concrete to go say, but I still think you have to have that conversation. And I think an important thing, especially for high school coaches, is like maybe go to your AD and be like, listen, we're not going to be able to move forward as a program. We might take a step back if this player leaves, but we're not going to be able to move forward if this player stays. So I either got to get this player on board or I got to get him off, because then, I kick this player off and parents get involved and whatever. But I do think the process is pretty crystal clear, and you both just talk to it. The standard is the standard. And if there's not met standards, you got to hold people accountable. And if it is a gray area, the worst thing you can do is just straight avoid it. What do you guys think about that?
Real quick, sorry. I think TJ, the coaches listening, got to get real with themselves, because I often think coaches, we don't do a good job teaching what it is. We don't get very specific about it, and they want to blame and they get frustrated at the player, but they haven't yet clearly defined the standard. They haven't taught it very well, and so you got to ask yourself, if you're a coach and a leader, have I taught it well? Do I need to teach it better? If I've told you this 12 times, well, maybe they're not listening, maybe they're not focusing, or maybe you didn't teach it the first 12 times very well.
Yeah, and to both your points, I think the standard part, I do think it comes back to a little bit of that connection piece. And Sam, like from a framework perspective, it's how do you set up the relationship and their relationship within the team. So something I've started doing the last couple of years because of this very reason, because I'd end up in these kind of weird gray area conversations, is I start every season, like I have rugby's set up in like two position groups, backs and forwards, kind of like bigs and guards. And so I would have the backs, which could be like 15 to 17 guys. And I'll meet with every player at the beginning. And one of the main things I'm looking for, and I ask directly, like, what do you want to get out of this season? What do you want to get out of your career? What do you want to get out of life? And once I get them to feed me that, like, oh, you want to play for the national team? Unreal. I want that for you too. Sweet. And then the last one is like, how do you want to operate and be seen by your teammates in this environment? And then once they feed me that, like they're writing the contract. And then I finish with like, how can I help you do this? And are you giving me permission to hold you to those goals? Because I want those things for you. Because then it just gives you a very clear, like, hey man, remember when we talked, like you're saying you want to play for the national team and you want to be considered one of the best teammates on this team. Like I I asked permission to hold you accountable and I'm just not seeing it. And here's the actions I'm seeing. Like training ends and you have not one time stayed and done extra work, which is something we talk about all the time as a team. That's going to make us all better. You're literally the first guy off the field. To me, that's not somebody that wants to be a good teammate. That's not somebody who wants to make the national team. So what's the disconnect? And then one thing I also want to come back to with coaches on this topic, because it is such an important one, is humans are complex. We're in the people business. You can't think one conversation solves any of this. Like I said, like if you have the conversation, I said it is what it is, but it's also like you got to keep going back. If you're going to have that player, you got to be like, how do I keep helping you? How do we stay connected? Because sometimes you leave that conversation feeling kind of good, like, oh, I think I made some ground. And a week goes by, you've lost another game, and you're like, oh man, this dude is right back to that strange body language, that disconnect. So it's like, hey, how do I stay connected with you? Can we meet every couple of days? And like, you just have to keep touching it with somebody when you see that the disconnect is not going to be bridged very easily.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good point, Brendan. And it made me think of there's a high school coach here I've mentored the last few years, and they just took over. They've been an assistant. Now they're taking over a program as a head coach. And I went and watched one of their games recently. Their best player is very competitive, is a good leader, is vocal, is emotional. And during this game, they were kind of openly questioning some things that were happening in the game, like getting matchups. They got switched off the other team's best player, and I see him kind of barking at the sideline. And then we jumped on a phone call the next day and talked through it, me and the coach, and there was frustration mounting because he didn't feel like this best player was buying in, and they had had a lot of success the previous couple of years, and now this player was the leader of the team, and some other guys had graduated. And my advice to him was, hey, you need to acknowledge this guy is a good leader. He wants to win. He's sourcing things from a really good place. But now you got to channel it the right way, and you got to get him bought into how you're leading, and you got to make sure he's not in the locker room when you're not around, or when the guys go have a bite to eat after, that he's got your back. And so you're going to have to work hard at that relationship. So I'm saying all that to say, like, there is some nuance to all this. It's not always black and white. Coaches got to recognize when their leader isn't bought in completely. First, have an open conversation, celebrating, acknowledging what they do really well, and then identify the couple problem areas. And you're going to have some real important dialogue with that player about how do we come to common ground. I think all this, TJ and Brendan, as we're talking about it, what comes to mind for me and so important, we've got to, good coaches or master coaches, master teachers have to be master communicators. When I think about some of the best coaches that we think about that have won all these national championships, like a Phil Jackson or a Gino Auriemma or a Pat Summitt or you name it, I think probably if we were around them for a couple of years, we'd say, man, they're all different, but they know how to communicate with their players, both individually and as a unit. And so I hope coaches listening say, man, I need to work every day at becoming a better communicator.
Yeah, I think it's a couple things, Sam. One, I love your question earlier, Brennan. How do you want to be seen by your teammates? Because anytime you ask a question and it gets answered, it gives you a point of reference to be able to go back and be like, you're not actually doing this, or you want to be on the national team, whether it's performance-based or whether it's culture-based or whatever. If you haven't asked those questions, you're assuming that a player wants to show up a certain way. And that was a big mistake of mine as a young coach. Is my dad told me this. He coached 30 plus years, and he said, hey, look, your biggest issue is going to be that you're going to coach a lot of people that don't want it like you want it. And I was like, well, what do you mean? Everybody wants it. Like that was my assumption, like everybody wants it. And I look back on him telling me that, and I'm like, man, that's still true. 25 years later, like I go in and I feel like sometimes I want it more than the players want it. But if you haven't asked those questions, like how do you want to be seen by your teammates, then you don't really know what standard to hold them to. And honestly, if they answer the question like, well, I don't really care, then you know right away where you stand and what you got, what you're up against. But a lot of times we never know what you're up against. And then the second thing is I think it's never too late to establish a new standard. And a lot of times it's like just going in and being like, hey, team, listen, and I've done this in multiple years, and I've said, like, hey, our culture this, culture that, and I've been like, hey, listen, here's a new standard, and here's the reason for the standard. So like one that we implemented was like high fives above the shoulder. Okay, why above the shoulder? Well, because I think a lot of you are getting away with maybe I'm being a decent teammate by the hip hand five, whatever. Like I need that teammate to know you're with them and you're about it. So I need high fives above the shoulder. That's the new standard. I should have established it before, but I didn't. My bad. But I want to take our culture to a new level. So we have a new standard, and I'm going to hold us to it, and I'm going to hold myself to it. And like, that's fine. Like you just missed. You were vulnerable with them. You told them, like, we got to up this ante here. We got to do better. Here's a new. And now that player, that leader can either decide to meet that or not. And you can be like, Brendan, look, I haven't seen you give a high five above the shoulder in 3 days. And that's the standard. Like, what's going on? It's never too late to establish that one. And the third thing that I think about all this, Sam, is when you're talking about that one particular player and whether they're being a good leader or being not, I think a team really respects a coach that steps into the locker room and is willing to have that conversation. And let's just say that player is you, Sam, and like, hey, listen, Sam and I went at it in the game a little bit yesterday, team, and I want you to know this. Like, I understand what Sam was saying. Like, Sam wants to win, and so Sam is trying to get that done. However, I don't approve of how Sam did it. Sam and I got to work on how we're going to communicate this. But we are on the same page. Sam wants to win. I want to win. We just got to get some clarity here. And Sam and I have had this conversation. This is what clarity looks like. From now on, when he feels this, he's going to address it like that. And I'm going to address him like this. And we're going to make sure, because we are on the same mission. Even though, because people are like, oh man, they're going at each other. Those two players, coach and player, don't like each other. Like, there's nothing wrong with having that open conversation and letting the team know that. I mean, even if it was worse, be like, hey, listen, Sam and I, we have a similar mission, but I'm not approving of how Sam has been talking to me. That will not happen anymore if that's the route you want to go. But saying that stuff in front of the team and letting them know, it shows them like, hey, I'm flexible or I'm not flexible here, and here's the standard, or here's something I'm willing to bend on, or here's something I'm willing to ask for forgiveness for. I think those open conversations are really big for a team.
I think TJ is on that point. Well, I want to hear your thoughts on this, and Brendan, jump in. But like, if you do address it in front of the team, there is a question: do I first talk to the player? Here's a mistake that coaches make: they talk individually to the player where it happened in public, and then they never come back to the team and address the team on how it was handled, and the team is left to just their own devices. And oftentimes they think, oh, that our coach is weak. Our coach is going to let players do that, and then you're going to have other players challenge you. So, like, you can address it in front of the team without the individual, or sometimes it's better to address it individually and then tell that player, hey, I'm fixing to go in here and we're going to talk to the team about this, and just want you to know that, and it doesn't catch them by surprise. I mean, I think all that depends on the player, depends on the team, depends on the age and stage.
Yeah, I think definitely like the player first in all scenarios. But let's say you go to the player and they're like, well, they don't really give you good feedback. I might go to the team and be like, hey, listen, we had this conversation. I'm not sure if Sam's all the way bought in, but believe it, he's going to be bought in. And if he's not, he's going to sit. Right. Like, now hopefully the conversation goes better than that. And Sam's like, yeah, coach, I'm in it and I want to win too. I apologize for how I talked. And you say, hey, I'm sorry for not being more clear, or whatever it might be. And then you let the team know, hey, Sam and I are in a good place. We both want to win. We figured out how to communicate better. Here's the standard of how we're going to communicate, because we've had that conversation. And then everybody starts moving forward from that place. I just think it's that gray area when you say nothing, do nothing. Everybody saw y'all arguing and going at each other, and everyone's like, ooh, I guess this player gets away with that. You just can't leave that stuff open.
Yeah, at the pro level, Brendan, sorry, at the pro level, back to you, is like, I saw the Draymond Green situation with Steve Kerr recently, where Draymond just goes to the locker room. And I was thinking, and then I heard Draymond say like, well, I thought it was the mature thing of me to do, remove myself from the situation. I say, okay, yeah. Also, what would have been mature is to you to have some humble pie and say, my bad, guys, my bad, coach. You're the coach. I got to do a better job. Let me stay in the game and actually show maturity. Like, I don't know. I think he likes to justify it. But then I heard Kevin Durant recently talk about that whole blow up that led to him leaving Golden State. He actually, all this stuff we're talking about, he said it was never addressed with the team. He said they suspended Draymond. We talked individually, but there was never any team. He said, like, we didn't go in the room and be like, hey, how'd y'all feel about it? And that left a sore spot from what I gathered hearing Kevin Durant talk about it. No collective team discussion on this really weird blow up, and Draymond said all these kind of things to KD. So at the pro level, Brendan, you are dealing with men who have families and kids, and they're more emotionally and mentally mature, or maybe they're not sometimes too. I don't know.
Yeah, it's funny. I was going to bring up that exact clip from the Matt Barnes, Steven Jackson podcast where KD was talking about that, and basically saying, like you pointed out, part of the reason he started isolating himself from the group was because it was just like everyone was there, everyone saw this interaction, and he obviously would have felt disrespected. And like, yeah, we had me and Draymond, we were pretty close. We hashed it out. I told him how I felt. He told me how he felt. But like, we never talked as a group. And he used the word family a couple of times, like, which I think in sports, in team sports, we throw that around, and that comes back to a bigger conversation. That's a whole podcast of like living your values. And if you're going to use the word family, what does that mean? But I come back to what I said at the beginning. It's the connection piece. If you can establish like real human connection, a lot of this solves itself. Like I've had players say to me who I have good relationships with, I go check the pulse of the team through the guys I'm close with. Like, hey man, you're close with the boys. Like, how are things going? Like, how's the vibes? And guys will tell me they're like, I've had guys say to me like, don't worry, B, like, if vibes are ever off or there's any issues, we got you. And if we need to talk to you, I'll let you know before anything gets out of hand, because I've established that relationship. You're not going to have a bulletproof relationship with every player, but as long as you're building those connections, and you can always have a pulse on the team because you have that trust. Like you have players that will tell the leader if he's stepping on a line, like, hey man, like timeout, you got to respect coach. And basically you have those guardians in the locker room because of those connections. And I think that's something like when Lisa talked about me coming on the podcast, she was like, something I've always seen you talk about in rugby, like the connection piece. And I mean, part of it could be just because of the violent nature of the sport. You kind of like naturally have to have that close bond when you're putting the body on the line. But I also think we do a lot of intentional stuff to get player connection, coach connection, like, and some of it I think in the basketball world, I wonder if like would seem cheesy, like when we go into the building and we have like 35 plus players. Anytime you enter a room, a meeting, a building, if it's your first time, the expectation and standard is you will greet every single person, like handshake, bro hug, whatever. And like it can feel a bit awkward when you're not used to it. When I first got to professional rugby, and like it was like, hey man, this is what we do here. This is how we operate. You will, like, we didn't see you go say hi to every single player when you walked in. I was kind of like, oh man, like that just felt kind of awkward. It's like, nah man, like just say what's up. You don't gotta have a 10-minute conversation. And like even after practice, like we're always in a circle, touching each other, arm around each other. And again, 35 people, big circle, but everyone can see everybody. So if someone's talking, everyone sees their eyes and everyone has a touch. Just little things like that, I think just naturally like force organic connection, which then like some of these fires you get put out before they rage because of the personal connection and people wanting the culture and wanting the team to move forward in a positive direction.
Yeah. One final thought, Sam, I have before we wrap this up is like, I don't really know the background of all the KD and, Draymond or whatever, but it's interesting to hear y'all talk about that, like referencing the family and when it, and I think this is super important. We've hit on it 3 or 4 times already, but I can see how KD felt isolated when the family doesn't even address it. You know what I mean? You're like the black sheep in the family. Like, even if the family addresses it and says, Durant, you are being a baby, you are being whatever, at least you know where you stand in the family. And you know what issues people have with you, and you know what problems. And I think that's true. Like imagine going to work every single day. I think the worst feeling for an employee is not knowing where you stand. Do people like me here? Do they believe in me? Do they not? Same thing in family. Even if it's a little bit negative, you at least know where you need to go. And that whole silence thing, like not talking about it and pretending like it's not happening, I just never see that go well in any situation. And it goes back to the whole communication and connection piece. If it's not happening, not talking, it goes back to Brent's first point. You're not connected, right? Like if you're just avoiding each other, there's no connection there. And that usually starts with communication. And that can be it is a negative vacuum, no matter what arena, what age, what stage. It's a problem.
Yeah, great stuff. Brendan, do you have any final thoughts just on this? Close us out, or before I close us out, on buy-in, connection, relationships, and that culture?
Yeah, I mean, just the stuff we talked about, like you're going to get what you put your attention on and put intention into. So all this stuff we're talking about, like we know is hard. Like you guys had a great podcast recently about like handling tension, and a lot of it was like tough conversations. And it's just always going into those. Like, remember, we're the leaders. Like sometimes you got to come in with a firm hand and make sure the standard's clear and there's levels of respect. But a lot of time it's just like open the door to allow someone to show you who they are and where they're at. And it'll make it way easier for you to bridge whatever gap there is. But yeah, it's just, we're in the people business, and there's always going to be things you're not prepared for. But as long as you feel good in who you are and you've put in the work to prepare your team and all those things, you can take a breath and you can take it on and just, we're all in this together. So just stay in it and keep it moving.
Love it. Well, Brendan, awesome to have you on. Love the conversation. I'm hoping coaches really found a lot of value, and coaches listening. I think all this kind of trends toward you can have the double win of being a transformational coach and a successful coach. And I actually think this whole conversation is foundational to both of those things. Being transformational, you better have connection, you better have relationship, you better get buy-in. And ultimately, if you do that, it's the right thing to do. And number two, you can win more games. Maybe you can hit your head on your ceiling of potential. So coaches, yeah, we'd love to hear from you. Love to hear your thoughts. Jump into the conversation on social media with us. As always, we always have free resources at PGC Hustle. So for Brendan and for TJ, I'm Sam, and we are the Harwood Hustle.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Coaches, if you're looking for some in-season support or a more direct approach to your development in all facets of coaching, join our PGC coaching community. You can sign up for a free trial today by going to pgchustle.com/trial. That's pgchustle.com/trial. From the Harwood Hustle team, thanks again. We can't wait to be with you again next week.